Okay. If others join, I will let them in. Well, thank you for giving up your time tonight on a Wednesday night to join this. I do appreciate it. And I haven't done a webinar like this for quite a long time. I've done other online programs and retreats and things, but this was like consciously on my mind for several months now. And I felt it was a good time to talk about this. And actually, it's been on the news. It's on the news all the time, and it's been on the news quite a bit in the last few days. But from my perspective, as a nutritionist and naturopath, I have a lot of concerns about this. And so I just want to talk through. I want to talk through about what we know about these medications, the things that perhaps are not being talked about so much or at all, which really concerns me. And the fact that people are not being told how to eat healthily. It's very much a weight first and health second, although I do appreciate if people have a substantial amount of weight to lose, then of course is having an impact on their health. But from a person's point of view, I think the focus is very much it's about the weight. In fact, many people only think about weight and are not really coming at it from a health first. And of course, that's my or approach with everything that I do. So just very quickly around the agenda, I just want to talk about facts about the state of the nation and why we've probably got ourselves into this situation, about the three main medications, what we know about them, how they work, the side effects, and there's some very common ones, less common, and very serious side effects that may be rare, but they are happening. Other considerations we need to think about in relation to those. And then I'm going to go on to part two, which is, I'm sure, what you want to learn about, as well as knowing a bit more about the medications, but about the more natural and healthy approaches for sustained weight loss. Why we're in a bit of a problem, what I call metabolic imbalances that are going on, why we need to try and encourage fat burning and how we do that. And then I'll put a little bit about nutrients that can support these medications, what they're doing as the GLP-1 agonists, which means they're helping to promote GLP-1. I'm going to talk about that. Um, I think you all know me, but for others that might catch up on watching this and may not know me so well, I've now been in practice 15 years as a naturopathic nutritional therapist. And I had a quick look through, I think I've seen about 750 clients in 15 years. My main specialism these days is around digestive gut health, but I see people with all sorts of other health conditions. So much does stem back to the gut, but it's not all about that. And I deal, very much with chronic health concerns that people have, or a multitude of disparate health concerns and symptoms. I am professionally trained to the highest NOS, National Occupational Standards in the UK, and insured in a number of different modalities. And prior to doing this, I was in corporate for 20 years, most of the time with BT. And I do have very close ties to the profession today. I helped establish the Naturopathic Nutrition Association back in 2010. I was chair for 7 years and then stood down. I took over and ran the Natural Healthcare College, teaching nutritional therapy for 5 years, from 2013 to the end of 2017, and sold the college. And now I'm involved with the General Naturopathic, I put college, I'm sorry, I should say General Naturopathic Council. So I'm accredit naturopathy for the UK. And last year I was invited onto the board of the General Naturopathic Council, which is a regulatory body. So let's go on. Oh, yeah. I mean, this is me. I am really passionate about helping people live healthier, more active lives. And you'll see at the end, if you don't know, that I have a YouTube channel as well. So I like to talk about what I do, hence doing this tonight for free. So a little bit about the state of the nation. And, we are in this situation now. It's not an individual's fault. It's the way big pharma, big food is leading us this way. And 50% of adults by 2050, the Lancet reported on this recently, will be overweight or obese by 2050. And no wonder there is this focus with these sorts of medications, but Is it going about it the right way? It's big pharma driven rather than health driven with people like myself and thinking about this. But again, medical profession have no training in nutrition. So why would they think of it from this approach? A recent health survey, 2022, that 64% of adults were overweight and obese. And Frontier Economics have sort of calculated that the cost to the NHS of obesity in 2023 was 11.4 billion because so many health conditions relate back to obesity and inflammation is driven from obesity, but not only that. Um, and this was on the news this week. Was it last week? 1 in 20 million, so 1 in 20 people, 2.5 million, are now taking these medications, these jabs. 1 in 20. Yes, some are being prescribed through the NHS and GPs, but there's an awful lot of people who are signing up through other means, people getting onto the bandwagon. We've heard about them costing £250 a month. There's people getting onto this and making a lot of money by offering these medications without necessarily, and I don't think they are, giving them the full facts about them. And as one of you just mentioned, there is no nutrition education offered. There is no focus on healthy eating. As we'll go on to talk about, how do people learn how to eat healthily, learn how to eat in a way that sustains weight loss? There is no focus on this at all, and that's why people are getting trapped into taking them. There was something that popped up on social media for me yesterday or today. Somebody on, was it Good Morning Britain or something, saying how she needs to keep taking it. She needs to keep taking it to lose the final £5. £5. What happens when she loses the final £5? And then is she going to stop? And then the weight loss will start to go on. So the three main medications, Ozempic came first. These came about, and this drug came about from a type 2 diabetes perspective. Now, type 2 diabetes is increasingly extremely dangerous if it's not well controlled, and if people lose the ability to control their own insulin sensitivity and end up with full-blown type 2 diabetes. We know it's lifestyle driven, and we know in certain circumstances it can be reversed, but it's dangerous. So this medication, using semaglutide, which is a GLP-1 receptor agonist. Now, GLP-1, this is a hormone. It's produced in the gut and it increases insulin release on one aspect, and which in turn is going to help regulate blood glucose levels. So as blood glucose levels starts to rise, we get really a sort of corresponding increase in insulin. And insulin is going to try and drive glucose out of the blood and try and take it up into the cells. You cannot leave blood in the bloodstream. Long term, this is how people end up losing limbs and going blind at the worst case scenarios. Very, very dangerous situation. Um, so we need to get the glucose out of the blood, and too much glucose in the blood actually does then in turn lead to obesity and weight gain, because the body has to deposit this excess glucose somewhere, and it doesn't necessarily need to go into our muscles, and it be stored in the liver. And so therefore it will be converted through the liver into triglyceride fat and be deposited as fat. But from a type 2 diabetes perspective, it came about that by promoting this hormone in the gut, this GLP-1 hormone, it is going to encourage the removal effectively of the glucose from the bloodstream, which is a good thing for people with type 2 diabetes. They also found out that it slowed digestion and increased feelings of fullness. And therefore, not only was the benefit on 4,000 people that one of the main markers to test for diabetes, HbA1c, was lowered by 1.2 to 1.8%, but there was an associated fall in body weight. But I want to talk about the two main ones that are used now, Wegovy, first of all. So this has been designed specifically for weight loss. It's using again this semaglutide synthetic GLP-1 receptor agonist. So, as we said, it's a hormone that's produced in the gut in response to food, and it acts on receptors in the brain to regulate your appetite. Therefore, it's going to reduce feelings of hunger and it increases feelings of fullness. So you don't want to eat as much. What this drug will also do, and we know these are all, I didn't put it on here, but they're all injectable drugs. You inject once a week. It slows gastric emptying. So it slows the speed with which food leaves the stomach. So it's going to prolong this feeling of satiety and fullness. And it reduces, you're hearing this term a lot. I don't know if you've heard it, but people are talking about food noise. So it's reducing the cravings that people get. And again, because of the link also with insulin, enhancing insulin secretion, of course, it's going to help with blood sugar regulation. And by the explanation I've just given, it will also help to lower the storage of fat. So, some of the studies with regards to this creating satiety and the feeling of fullness, slowing the speed with which food leaves the stomach, studies have shown that it reduces from an energy point of view, which is calories, and I don't count calories, so which we'll talk about later, but on average, 35% reduction in energy intake. So, effectiveness from these is that over 6 months, it's been shown that 90% of people achieve 5% loss of body weight. Um, in other clinical trials, average of 15 to 20% loss of body weight over 68 weeks. People are getting substantial weight loss. You can see it in people. For those that say they haven't done this, when you saw them 6 months ago and suddenly you see them looking about a third of the weight they were, they've done this. There's no other way people are going to lose this weight this quickly. But the after effects is that two-thirds of weight loss will be regained. And in practice, reality is showing that the gain is going to be more than the loss because people have got so used to this weight loss and not being able to eat much. And then they can eat what they want while they're on the drugs without thinking about how to eat in a healthy way. I'm not saying everybody is going to be like that, but people do want this quick fix and how wonderful that they can take a drug that reduces their appetite and they're going to lose weight in remarkable ways. They stop the drug, and yes, they are, if it's done properly and it's done through, the controlled way through the NHS and the GP, slowly and slowly tapered off. But then people cannot control their appetite. They haven't learned how to eat in a healthy way, and the weight gain is very, very likely. So the other main drug here is Monjaro, has been approved by GPs for weight loss. These stats might be slightly out of date now. Approved for 250,000 adults who come under the category of obese because their BMI, well, actually, obese really comes over 30, but the BMI greater than 35, which affects 3.4 million adults in the UK. This uses tirzepatide, another synthetic GLP-1 receptor agonist, and it also contains this other hormone called GIP. It has a further impact on controlling or enhancing insulin release, improving insulin sensitivity and blood glucose regulation, as well as appetite suppression. So it's been found to have an enhanced effect at reducing appetite and reducing body weight over time. More so than just the Wegovy, which is the GLP-1 agonist alone. So it seems to have enhanced weight loss. A little bit, 50 to 20% weight loss in 1 year. And also with this drug, the HbA1c levels also reduced by 2.3%. It's also been found that it's going to lower cardiovascular risk in those that have type 2 diabetes already, and already at enhanced cardiovascular risk. So there are benefits to these things. But weight gain does happen, 14% gain weight over a short period of time. We don't have long-term stats on these yet, but we've got enough stats here to to make it sound really promising. Sounds promising, where's the catch? Well, here we go. Now, these are common, very common side effects, very, very common. So when we think back to the um, reducing gastric emptying in the stomach and this feeling of fullness, it is very common for people to feel nauseous all the time. People get used to it, but they just feel constantly nauseous. People will be sick, potentially because they're trying to eat more than the body is now saying that it can cope with. Diarrhea is extremely common on these drugs, including urgency and messy pants. Why would you want to go around with that? Well, if you're that, you're that driven to be losing the weight, people are putting up with all sorts of things. On the other hand, for some people, it can turn to constipation rather than diarrhea. You get stomach pain, probably because of this impact on what it's doing to your stomach. It's just not normal. And the knock-on effects, which are not surprising, is fatigue and weakness. If you're going to reduce your food intake by 35% or more, you're going to reduce your food intake, you're going to reduce your nutritional intake, your macronutrients, your vitamins, your minerals. So, is it any surprise that fatigue and weakness is a consequence and very common? And people very commonly get headaches as well. Whether that's to do with magnesium deficiency, I'm not sure, but potentially. Other common side effects are not very common, as in most people, but very, still common. People start to feel dizzy, they get indigestion. Now, a lot of these symptoms at the top here are all linked, not flatulence, but are linked to the stomach. So, indigestion, burping, bloating, gastritis. This is inflammation of the stomach lining. GERD, which is like acid reflux, gastrointestinal reflux, heartburn, and bile acid reflux, because these drugs have an impact on slowing bile flow. When we slow bile flow down and create what I call sludgy bile, we can then get bile putting pressure on the stomach, getting back into the stomach, coming up through the stomach, and can mimic the action of acid reflux and seem the same, but actually bile acid reflux is worse. So not only might you end up with gastritis, but you could end up with burning in the esophagus and just not nice at all. Problems with the gallbladder, because bile flow becomes impaired. Some people could be left with gallstones. So gallbladder could be a problem. People might then start getting problems, and very common sign of having gallbladder problems, pain on the right hand side that travels up the right hand side to the right hand sort of shoulder blade on that side. Hair loss has to be nutrient linked. Changes to mood, links to depression and anxiety. Hypoglycemia, of course, people who have type 2 diabetes, I mean, that needs to be really carefully monitored because of the way it drives improved insulin sensitivity. So, hypoglycemia, low blood sugar, can be a potential problem. Hypotension can be a problem. So, low blood pressure, potentially for those already at the starting point of being on the low side, not the high side. And you might have heard of Ozempic phase, because people just lose so much weight from their face. It's taking away lean muscle mass very, very quickly, as we'll come on and talk about. So you get this Ozempic face that maybe some people think looks quite nice, but it's not really. Rare but serious side effects. These are being reported. Fast heartbeat, jaundice, pancreatitis, incredibly dangerous pancreatitis, inflammation of your pancreas. Your pancreas is driving the ability to digest food. That's its major role, actually. The largest portion of your pancreas is to do with digestive enzymes. The much smaller part of it is to do with insulin and glucagon, to do with blood sugar regulation, although it's so busy controlling that. But, pancreatitis, extremely dangerous. Gallbladder diseases, including gallbladder removal. Some recent, well, actually it was 2023, but there was a case, at least one case, of an increased risk of thyroid cancer when it was used for 1 to 3 years. And people are staying on these drugs now because they're so effective. They don't want to stop them because they know they're not going to be able to control the ability to keep the weight off. And then there's been research about damage to your retina in those with diabetic retinopathy, possibly those that, yeah, who have the type 2 diabetes, kidney and kidney stones, bladder stones, are also rare but serious. And of course, there's long-term dependency on these drugs, and the longer term dependency is just going to increase the risk of some of these. So yeah, it's all a bit alarming. But how much is this being, how much are people being advised of these? So other considerations, anything that we do, we need to give informed consent. I was trained about informed consent and I had to understand it. I had to write about informed consent in a paper once. Um, Everyone in the medical profession, before they do anything, is supposed to, you have to provide informed consent. And the only way you can provide informed consent to give the go ahead is if you've been given all the risks involved with this, which would include all the side effects, but that's not necessarily happening. And it certainly probably is not happening if they're not going through the correct channels and through the NHS. There is no knowledge about healthy eating, no knowledge about the emotional triggers, no knowledge about how and when to eat, which I'm going to go on and talk about. No knowledge about what's driven the problem for these people in the first place, enable for them to start to make those changes, start to think about it while they're on these drugs, start to make healthy choices, so that when they come off them, they're in that informed position, they know what they're doing, and there's a greater chance of long-term success. There needs to be consideration around our metabolism and lifestyle factors I'm going to go on and talk about. There are nutrient deficiencies, B12, iron, calcium are very common. This is possibly to do with low stomach acid because all of these require good stomach acid levels for their absorption. So I think it's probably to do with that. Interestingly, 40% of the weight loss on these drugs is lean body mass, not fat, which is going to slow down your metabolism. So this was reported in a journal last year. 40% of weight loss, lean body mass, is that what you really want to lose? You want to be losing the fat, you don't want to be losing your lean body mass. And of course, this impossibility to try and maintain the weight loss, certainly at that speed, and keep it off, and creates this dependency. Most people expected to regain lost weight within a year of stopping. But, isn't weight loss the priority, however it is achieved? But I want now to move on to part two to start to think about how do we get in this mess? What has happened to us as a nation, and why do we get in this mess? So I'm going to start talking about food noise and why fat gets trapped and why do people try and lose weight and they can't maintain it and they go on calorie controlled diets and it might work for a while but doesn't last, doesn't work long term. Why can't we get the fat out of the cells? How do we turn off this food noise that's going on all the time? Because the more we limit food, the more people start to think about food all the time. So we've lost sight of how to eat. This is the first thing I want to say. And I talk a lot about stopping snacking. I'm going to talk about this. We are not designed to constantly snack, but wherever we go and wherever we visit shops, we find food at the tills everywhere. You go into Smith's, not called Smith's anymore, is it? And there's chocolate and cheap chocolate at the tills. You go into pay for your petrol, and we've just got rows of crisps and chocolate and other snacks there. You go and buy a cup of coffee. You might stop to get a cup of coffee somewhere. And most of the places you go to, the food there is not food. It's just white, carbohydrate, high sugar driven snacks. Our body is not designed for that at all. The impact of having constant snacking is that it is driving more insulin. Well, I might have just talked about driving insulin is good for diabetes, but for most of us, I did describe that what happens is constant snacking. Most of the time, it's driving up blood glucose. It releases insulin. The body goes, I don't need any more glucose stored in my cells. Thank you very much. I've got plenty. And so it's going to promote fat storage. But the other thing that's not talked about is the more insulin is raised, the more it inhibits fat breakdown. And that's really key if you're trying to lose weight, because you might be trying to do all the right things and you might be doing it from a calorie control point of view, which I'm about to talk about. But unless you're thinking about when and how to eat, you might be creating insulin release, and that is going to inhibit fat breakdown. Now, the other focus, of course, for years and years and years, and it's still done through the NHS like this, is the focus is on calories. And it doesn't talk about how the body utilizes our macronutrients from fats, proteins, and carbohydrates. It just talks about calories and calories in and calories out. It talks about control your calorie intake and increase your calorie output through doing more exercise. It's not looking at how the body is going to utilize the macronutrients that you're putting in your body. If you focus on calories, you will focus on eating carbohydrates because 1 gram of carbohydrate is 4 calories. Whereas fats and proteins, 1 gram of those is 9 calories. So you would automatically be reducing your fats. Sorry, I've got that wrong. Proteins 4 calories, but it's fats that are nine. But it's the same thing goes here. The focus is driven away from eating fats, driven towards eating carbohydrates. People don't think enough about putting protein into their diets anyway. And I have to say, calories are completely and utterly irrelevant. The more we study this, the more we understand. I haven't got a clue how many calories I put into my body every day. I really do not know about my calorie intake. I know when I feel full. I know when I've eaten enough. I know when I'm managing my weight the right way because my waistbands on my clothes don't get too tight. And if they do, I know I need to do something about them. So it's not this approach. And the other thing is that its hormones are all over the place. You know, insulin is a hormone. And I'm going to talk about other hormones, but hormones are driving our hunger and are, either driving or limiting the weight loss. And it becomes a real game, this weight loss game. I don't know if you can see the end of the slides because I can see all the people down the side. You might not. So I can't see all the words on the right hand side. Um, the body is designed for famine and survival. I do talk about it, and other people talk about it from a stress point of view, hunter-gatherers. But realistically, we have not changed. Our body has not changed since we were hunter-gatherers. Our body is not designed to be constantly snacking and constantly eating. It's designed for famine. It's designed for survival. And so if you start to do calorific reduction and reducing calorie intake, there is a chance that your body is going to naturally hold on to its reserves. And that's why I think some people will try and do calorie controlled diets and start to lose some weight. And things start to go reasonably well to start with. I think it depends on how much weight you've got to lose. But then it stops because the body's then starting to hold on to reserves. It starts to get harder and harder. And fat does get trapped in our cells. The body loses its ability to tap into fat reserves because it's been taught to burn glucose at all cost and not fat. Now, some of you might have heard of ketogenic diets, which are high fat diet. I'm not going to talk about ketogenic diets, but it's an element of this in that because our body and our brain actually really likes to burn ketones that come from fat, not be constantly burning glucose at all cost. So if we can retrain the brain to let go a little bit of constantly thinking about glucose intake and, is it hungry all the time and this food noise? And if we can start to train it to burn fat, the body will start to breathe a huge sigh of relief. It will no longer send out constant signals wanting us to eat food at every moment. And it will stop this hunger, which is when we're hungry and our blood sugar levels are dipping low. We stop being irritable, it stops the shakiness, it stops the cravings, and we create this calm. So we need to encourage the body's adaptation for fat burning. We need to turn off this insulin signal. Yes, there's going to be some insulin. Of course, we need insulin, it's important, but we don't want this overdrive of insulin. So we need to turn off the insulin signal to tap into the fat reserves. Like I said, if insulin is raised, it inhibits fat breakdown. It does mean we do need to start to feel a little bit hungry. A little bit hungry. This isn't constant hunger. We do learn to have to learn to stop snacking. Now, I'm not talking about going from day one, today and tomorrow, you do all these things overnight, because this is, you learn to do these things and you start to make small changes. It's not all in one go. Everything that I'm going to start to talk about is making small changes. But if we can get to the point where we fast between our meals, so we aim for 4 to 5 hour fast, which should be achievable. That is a mini fast. You don't even want to be eating nuts. You don't want to put any food in your mouth at all. This is where we learn to stop snacking. It's not, and that's when we need to know how to eat our meals and what to put in our meals to try and stop the snacking and the desire to eat. And then overnight, what we really need is this extended fast. We need a minimum of 12 hours overnight. Maybe you can get to 14 hours. For some people, maybe that becomes 16 hours. We are all unique individuals. This is not a one size fits all. We do need to do that fast between meals. We do need to achieve a minimum of 12 hours, but it doesn't mean we need to do 14 or 16 hours. Some people like to do that and other people don't. How this could work in practice is that you have breakfast at 8 o'clock, you might have lunch at 1:30, you have dinner at 7 o'clock. Now, that lunch at 1 and dinner at 7, that's almost 6 hours in reality. Am I saying that you might not eat at all for 6 hours? Maybe you get this worked out so well that you don't. Some people might think after 4 hours, do you know what? I need a little something. And that could be a handful of nuts at that point in time. But you want to get to that 4 hours. It's when we don't eat in the right way that the body sends out hunger signals, the blood sugar levels get all over the place. And that's when we get this food noise that we just need to eat. We need to boost our metabolism, which is going to enhance this GLP-1 sensitivity. We have to get up and move. I did a thing on my Facebook group, which is in one of my podcasts, in my YouTube channel as well, around movement. We need to move more. We are not designed to be sedentary. Now, I can't say I achieve this really well, but an hour's intensive cardio at the gym is not the same as regular movement. I talked about the science behind the reason why we need to get up and move more often, because that encourages our metabolism, it encourages our glucose sensitivity. So we need to think about using the stairs. I sit downstairs at my office when I want to get up and go to the toilet. I go upstairs, even though I've got a downstairs toilet. I is trying to walk more, is trying to build in this movement throughout the day. If you're a gym buddy, well, just get down on the floor and 10 press ups, 10 star jumps, do something to get yourself moving, because it's the movement that is so important to boost your metabolism and to enhance this GLP-1 sensitivity. Um, the next phase on from that, which is starting to exercise in a fasted state, and it's going to promote fat burning quite easily at that point. No, you're not going to do this if you haven't got control over your blood sugar regulation, because the chances are you'd wake up in the morning and your blood sugar levels might be all over the place. And the thought of being able to go out and do any sort of exercise if you haven't eaten might make you feel a little bit faint. So it's doing things in the right order. But when you get control of balancing and regulating blood sugar, this is really achievable. When I go, particularly when I go on holiday, but I've been doing this actually a bit more recently at weekends. I've been doing a 10K run without eating, without having coffee, without eating. I've been doing it now. I run, so that's different. Not saying you should do that. When I go on holiday, I might get up in the morning before we go for breakfast and I might do a 5K run, something like that. But you want to get up and you want to, this is the time. If you set your alarm 15, even 15 minutes earlier, get out of the house because we'll talk about circadian rhythms and being outside in the morning. Go and do a power walk in the morning. Go and do 10 minutes. Come back lunchtime, some other point in the day between meetings. Go and do a power walk if you can. Do something, maybe not power walk, but just walk, get moving. It is so important to build this into your day. And as we get older, this is particularly relevant for women, but it's important for men and women, is that we need to build muscle because building muscle is going to encourage us to help to burn fat more, to monitor our glucose levels more readily. And actually, we do need to start thinking about lifting weights if we don't already do it, or some sort of resistance training with bands or something like that. Really, really important. We want to preserve our muscle mass, and at the same time, you'll increase your satiety and fullness when we start to eat more proteins and fats as well. So that's really, really important alongside doing these things is the protein, 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 protein. I talk about protein all the time. And this is what happens when people don't regulate their blood sugar. It tends to go all over the place. We want it on a more steady, even keel, the green line, but it tends to yo-yo a little bit. And that makes us want to reach for snacks when it starts to dip low. If that happens in the night and blood sugar dips low in the night, it can cause an adrenaline release that can wake us up. So nighttime waking could be due to imbalanced blood sugar regulation. So it is really, really important. So we need to calm these blood sugar peaks and dips. We need to stop this yo-yoing blood sugar, which keeps the mind constantly craving food and sugar and stimulants like tea and coffee. Now, how do we do this? We have to think protein first. We need to be thinking about eggs, lean meats. Yes, you can eat some red meat as well, but you want to try and choose, the best quality meat that you can. Eating fish, maybe have some Greek yogurt, maybe having some cheeses. Um, if you're vegan, vegetarian, well, you're going to have to choose more along the pulses line or tofu. But we need to think protein first with everything that we're doing when we're eating. This will increase that GLP-1 secretion, so supports that fullness and satiety. And the biggest impact it has is at breakfast. So you're certainly your first meal of the day. I don't generally promote intermittent fasting. I prefer to focus on getting breakfast, lunch, and dinner absolutely right when the meals are balanced. And if we get the meals right and balanced, then all the other things are going to follow on in my mind. And therefore, for me personally, and for other people, you don't necessarily need to do that long term, that long range intermittent fasting, which works for some people. But the biggest impact on creating this GLP-1 secretion, creating fullness and satiety, that has a knock-on effect through the rest of the day and stops you wanting to search for snacks and possibly unhealthy foods. It's getting that breakfast right and thinking protein first. From that, you want to be thinking about your healthy fats, oily fish, your salmon, sardines, mackerel, herring, a little bit of trout, olive oils and olives, nuts and seeds, avocados. Be eating them. Fats, yes, more calories. Forget that. They increase satiety. They increase fullness. Naturally slows the speed with which food leaves the stomach in a natural and healthy way, not in a medicated way. You will not get digestive symptoms if you've got good digestive secretions and you do this in the right way. You won't get the digestive secretions that I mentioned, problems, symptoms. We want to be eating more soluble fiber. Now, it's not just about the soluble fiber, but when we're linking it back to the GLP-1 production, soluble fiber in particular is very good. at slowing gastric emptying and promoting GLP-1 production via the microbiome. I'm going to talk more about that and why that's important. So, eating oats, so it could be porridge oats for breakfast, but not that alone because that's too much carbs. Your legumes like your pulses and your lentils, and a wide range of vegetables because vegetables are naturally rich in soluble fiber and insoluble fiber. So you will get your soluble fiber by eating those. Those who have been my clients will possibly recognize this because I do hand this out to my clients. This is what I call my healthy plate, which I've talked about for years, where we need to be thinking with every meal, maybe not so much breakfast with the vegetable side of things, but this is where we need to be thinking your protein and fats first. At least 35% of your plate, smaller proportion of starchy carbohydrates, and the starchy vegetables like potatoes, parsnips, and swede, maybe to a lesser extent beetroot, little bit starchy. And generally, we want to be filling our plates, certainly with lunch and dinner, with almost half the plate of vegetables and salads of all different colors. And yes, you can eat some fruit, but generally, we don't want to be overloading on fruit, particularly the more sugary ones like bananas and tropical fruits and grapes. Yes, you can eat them, but again, you want to eat them with the meal predominantly and not just think, well, fruit's healthy. I can have it as a snack because that's just going to play havoc with that glucose and insulin response inhibited fat breakdown. So this may be of interest to you is thinking about these nutrients that support this GLP-1 production, but I have put some things in red here because some of these nutrients, mostly from supplements, I'm trained to check for contraindications with medications or with health conditions. So we do need to be a little bit careful with what we choose here. But there are things that have been shown to help and support that GLP-1 production, resveratrol, but you have to be careful with certain medications. Berberine wouldn't be my first choice because berberine can act as an antimicrobial, which means it can impact your good microbiome, but it has other contraindications of medications. Psyllium husk can be great to use. It's a soluble fiber. I use it a lot in my practice, but more related to regulating bowel movements. You must always drink extra water with it. But it's a lovely soluble fiber, really good for cleansing the gut, but in turn, it can help with this GLP-1. Using prebiotics, these are fiber that feed your good bacteria. I use a range of these in practice. One of them I use is called PHGG. Then we have things like curcumin from turmeric and the very specific fats called EPA DHA. Somebody wants to join, they might as well, but they've missed a lot of this now. And these are anti-inflammatory, a big driver of promoting obesity and the difficulty with fat breakdown actually is low-grade inflammation in the body. And so curcumin and EPA DHA fats, they are going to promote, have anti-inflammatory effects in the body, which is really important alongside all of this. Green tea extract you might have heard of as a supplement. Quercetin, again, it's a flavonoid I use in practice for different reasons normally. And cinnamon actually is very, very good for helping regulate blood sugar, helping that glucose sensitivity in the cells. Now, talking about gut health, why do we need to optimize our gut health? Well, because GLP-1 is activated in the gut, and that's where it's secreted, but it's promoted by microbial metabolites, particularly something called butyrate. Butyrate is a metabolite promoted from the good certain microbes in our gut. And so, how are we going to encourage the growth of some of these microbes that are going to promote butyrate? Well, we can eat more fermented foods and more prebiotic foods, like I said. We want to stay hydrated. That's another aspect here. We need to stay hydrated anyway because hydration can soften our cell membranes I was taught very early on in my training that being dehydrated hardens our cell membranes and will make it harder for fat to be get and toxins to get out of our cells. It's a naturopathic thing. So we do need to stay well hydrated with water and herbal teas. Yes, you can have a little bit of tea, black tea and coffee, but we need to stay well hydrated. Really important because it can be a big be really inhibiting for helping lose fat if we're dehydrated, but it's very important to the gut as well. So, fermented and prebiotic foods to support the microbial population and diversity. We need the diversity. You might want to eat some of those fermented foods like sauerkraut, kombucha, drink kefir or drink the kombucha. But just generally, I talk about all the time, we need this very wide range of vegetables. And as I said, we might want to eat oats. Apples are a great source of pectin. I often promote stewed apple. Rye, we now know, is very, very good for feeding some of the good bacteria. And we want to minimize gut irritants like alcohol, too much sugar, and non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs are really not good for the gut and can promote inflammation of the gut and the gut barrier, which we wouldn't want to do. I'm conscious of the time. We need to stay, some lifestyle things, we need to stay in control of stress because cortisol, another important hormone here, inhibits fat burning and becomes pro-inflammatory in the body. And many of us get quite chronic stress. Stress gets into overdrive. We can't avoid all our stress, but we can teach our brain to calm the response to it. And it's so important to think about how we incorporate some of these things into our day-to-day life because so many people have too much stress in their lives. And any of these, it's finding what works for you and finding ways to incorporate some of these activities into your day-to-day life and be aware, trying to tune into your body and be aware when we are getting more uptight, when we're getting more overwhelmed by stress, to walk away from our desk or situations if we can and spend 5 minutes on doing things that are going to calm the sympathetic response and move us into the parasympathetic response to calm everything down. Sleep and our circadian rhythms. Sleep deprivation upsets metabolic harmony. There are two hormones that are released in response to our sleep and are also linked to our appetite and appetite regulation. One is ghrelin and one is called leptin, these hormones. And if we're sleep deprived, we get far too much ghrelin that is telling us to eat more, and leptin that is telling us we're full gets reduced. So, hence, coming back to hormones again. But sleep deprivation has some other impacts on how we're feeling. It does make us want to consume. If we're really tired, it makes us want to just reach for more of the rubbishy types of food. It's a driver of inflammation. It doesn't repair our cells overnight. It's just not putting us in the right frame of mind to be performing at our best, staying healthy and taking back control of our hormones. So, what do we do here? Well, it's trying to create a daily routine and stick to it 7 days a week. For me, it's bed at 10:30 latest. I'm up at 6:37. So invariably at weekends, I'm still waking up around about 7, even if I might try and set my alarm for 8, but I would never get up beyond 8 o'clock in the morning. But I am more of a morning person. Um, Trying to get outside in that first hour of the day, that's gonna it has a link to the pineal gland that's gonna reset your own clock, your circadian rhythm. So important if you struggle to get to sleep at night, get outside in the first hour of the day and do it religiously because it takes time to reset these things. You might want to avoid stimulants from 3 o'clock if you have trouble with sleep. Avoid gadgets 2 hours before bed. Get off them and put them to one side. Get off social media because that's just dreadful for creating stress as well. Consider blue light blocking glasses. You might think they're weird, but for some people, they work really well if you struggle with sleep. And our LED lights in our house are not good for us at all because of the blue light. and creating that nighttime routine. How are you going to unwind at night and learn to switch off? And we're all going to have our own ways to do that. But, taking back control of our sleep and creating routines that work for us and sticking to them. Of course, we might have situations where you go to a party and you get to bed at 2 a.m., but I don't know about you, but for me, it probably takes me a few days to get over that and get back on track. But, that's life and we shouldn't not do those things. But where we can, it's getting into a regular routine. Now, I've just put some meal suggestions here. This is not saying this is what you must do, but if you are a muesli porridge sort of person, then you need to be adding nuts and seeds and an abundance of nuts and seeds to the top of that because it's the nuts and seeds that are rich in fiber, rich in proteins, rich in fats that are going to create that balance. The muesli has to be low sugar, and the oats alone are not going to do it. They may be rich in beta glucans and soluble fiber and all these other great things, but unless you balance it with the protein and fat, you could end up being hungry mid-morning. Or a brilliant start to the day is eating eggs, however you may like to eat them. And that might be, you can, if you have an omelette, it might be a great way to throw in a few vegetables alongside that. Lunchtime, I'm a salad girl. That's what I love most of the year round. But I'm thinking what protein? It could be a tin of sardines. I might have today, I had, two poached eggs. I might sprinkle some seeds on the top of what I'm eating, things, the protein, the fats in all of those things. You might have an open sandwich, and I use the word open sandwich deliberately because you're minimizing the amount of carbohydrate bread that you're having. But think protein, you might add some salad to the top of that as well. Eat it with a knife and fork. If you make soup, where are you going to get your protein from? Homemade soup's wonderful with all those vegetables, but you've got to add the protein to it, whether it's chickpeas, lentils, something like that, that's going to keep you going till the next meal. Dinner, just some suggestions. I'm not saying this is what you must eat, but stir fry plenty of vegetables, add in prawns, turkey, sesame seeds, cashew nuts. That's where you're going to get your protein from. Easy meals, you could roast vegetables, you could roast a small sweet potato with your roasted Mediterranean vegetables. For me, just easy salmon, other fish, wrap it in foil, easy to do. Or you could make a veggie curry of some sort, but I put lentil dal because lentils are going to give you a protein. And if you are getting hungry between meals, you've got to think about the balance there. So hence a piece of fruit like an apple, but have a handful of nuts, or maybe a couple of oat cakes. And what protein you're going to add to that? Some hummus, maybe some nut butter. And I don't know why it's got five written after there, so ignore that. So some takeaway facts. You've got to think your lifestyle first, and you've got to plan to win, because these things aren't going to happen overnight, and it does take planning, and you do need to commit to this, and you need to start doing one thing at a time. So evaluate your stress triggers and try and discover calming techniques. Create a meal timing plan that works for you. What time's a day going to work for you, and can you stick to it most of the time around other commitments that you may have? And then what are you going to eat? And then you have to shop so that you've got the meals in. Think protein first, think fats, and think vegetables. And starchy carbohydrates should be your last choice when you're thinking about that. And create a sleep plan. Oops, something else to throw in there. Incorporate regular movement and start to lift weights. Now, you're not going to do all these things in one go. Think about where you could start. What could you start with? But the reality is that all of these things are relevant, and most people aren't thinking beyond the food, calorie control potentially, and they're not thinking about this bigger picture of what's making it just so hard to control that food noise and to try and encourage this fat burning. Small tweaks lead to big benefits. Start small, start somewhere, make it a habit, and move on to the next thing. So thank you for listening. Some further information, I've got my YouTube channel, so if you want to scan that code. If you've got any questions, and if you've got another 5 or 10 minutes, I'm happy to wait. If anyone wants to put anything in the chat, I'm happy to answer it. Or indeed, as there's not many of us, if you want to come off mute and ask me a question, then please do. I am doing a special offer for you guys. If you sign up for 4 weeks, I haven't got a QR code for this one, but if I can put this link in the chat, potential. Oops, I've now opened that. I wasn't going to do that. That wasn't my intention. But if I copy that, I should be able to put it in the chat. And then there we go. I've done that. Yes, 10 steps to improve metabolic health. You'll get a shorter questionnaire, not my full-blown standard questionnaire if you want to review for £125. So that's valid for 4 weeks. So if you've got any questions, I'm going to stop sharing actually. Has anybody got anything that they want to? Oh, Sophia. When I've tried fasting previously, it made me feel very low and I've struggled to function. What would change this? I don't know, Sophia, if you're talking about the intermittent fasting and going for up to 14 hours fast, or whether you mean just trying to go for a longer period of time type fast between meals. But I don't know if I've now covered this in terms of the fact that I wouldn't go for the intermittent fasting. I would just focus on getting the breakfast right and the lunch right and the dinner right and trying to achieve 4 hours. And I don't know if
Yeah,
that's something you can achieve. Yeah.
yeah, thank you, Caroline. I'd no sooner put it in chat and then you started to
Oh,
talk about
okay.
and you talked about blood sugars as well and foods
Yes.
to eat to
Yes.
prevent the blood sugars from fluctuating. And I
Yes.
know in the past I've struggled with blood sugar fluctuation.
Yes.
But yes, I was talking about intermittent fasting and those long
Yes.
periods that people seem to do.
Yeah.
And I found it really
Yeah.
hard. I
Because I
found my
don't
mood dropped. I
I
was
don't think
just
it suits
low and
everyone.
miserable. No,
Yeah.
okay.
I don't think it suits
Okay.
everyone. We're not a one size fits all, and it's finding what works for us. And clearly that wasn't right for you. You're better
No,
off sticking with a good breakfast, good lunch, good dinner
with gaps in between,
with the gaps.
with
You
with
gotta
the
have the
nice
gaps.
gaps
Yeah,
to
you gotta have the
settle,
gaps.
to give
Yeah.
your digestive system a break, I guess.
Give your
Yeah.
digest. Yeah, absolutely. And that when the 12-hour gap overnight is important.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Caroline.
That's
Thank you.
okay. Thank you for watching. Is there anyone else who wants to ask me anything, or are you all happy with what we've covered so far? I hope you found that really useful. I will share this webinar with you, and thank you very much. I hope you found this interesting, and go and enjoy your evening. Bye.
Thank you, Caroline. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.